But I remember I once saw this film, a documentary, which is called Natal 71.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Natal 71.
Yeah. It's a documentary film when you have your war in...
Yeah, about the correspondence between...
about an LP.
Yeah,
An LP.
An LP with messages.
Yes.
Yeah.
An LP with songs, with fado songs sent to the soldiers.
To the soldiers
to keep
in
their
Africa
spirit.
during the colonial
yes,
war.
And I don't remember, was it in Angola, was it whatever?
I think it's Angola, but the war was Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde, Guinea.
Yes,
I mean, there was a
or
lot
maybe
of fronts.
Mozambique. And I remember this film, I saw it in Lisbon, and it stuck into my mind very much because there was something, I always liked Soa.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite writers. And he brought me to the Portuguese culture. And there was always, a lot of Lithuanians have said that, and I've heard that so much. And yesterday after your performance, we went to have a drink and people were like, it was just so nice to listen to Portuguese language. Because in the way people talk, sometimes when you're in Portugal, you think someone is talking Lithuanian here, it's just like, I don't understand what.
Yeah, but the sounds are, I have it now in Vilnius, walking the streets.
Exactly.
The sounds are recognizable.
Exactly.
But not the words.
Exactly.
They're not in the right order.
Yes.
Let's say. Yeah, it's also this sort of, I don't know, there's maybe, as you said, I'm sure that in our case, the cliche, the stereotype of West knows less about East will be confirmed. I mean, I'm sure you know more about Portugal than I know about Lithuania, but you know, walking around in Vilnius, there's this sort of reserve of people. I don't know how to call it in English, but in French the word is pudeur.
Yes.
In Portuguese, pudor.
Yes.
It's a sort of respectful reserve, which I totally recognized in I don't like generalizations in nationalities, but that I feel a lot in Portugal also.
Yeah.
I do connect with that, not proudly imposing or arrogantly imposing who you are as a society or whatever. So,
you know, we have this this semi-Christian, semi-pagan totem, which is very popular in Lithuanian culture, which is called the sorrowful Jesus, rūpintojėlis. Usually it's placed in front of your house, somewhere in the house, you know, on the shelf, and it's a Jesus who sits like that in a sad state of mind, a pensive state of mind. Sometimes it's even translated as a pensive Jesus.
yeah.
Which came into, you know, it came from, it was somehow transferred from the pagan totems that were placed as well around your living area. And then when Christianity came, you know, instead of some God, that was their God.
Yeah.
And when I discovered Psoa, and I thought that's exactly the mood, you know, and all these like saudade, like the words. And I agree with you 100% that strangely, when us Lithuanians, I think I don't want to generalize for the whole of us, but I've seen and I've heard that a lot of Lithuanians, when they speak about Mediterranean countries, they are like, yeah, there are Greeks, Italians, Spanish, and then there are Portuguese who are a bit different than from everyone else. And I was thinking maybe it's because you are also in a corner, in the extremity, although surrounded by the ocean and by this vast area, to go into the world. And in our case, it's more just a forest,
Yeah.
you know. But at the same time, in the European context, we are on two corners, and then this feeling on the margin, it lets you understand a bit more of what a marginalized person, nation feels like. Then when you are in a heart, you know.
I mean, I think for sure geographically there's periphery that sort of connects us, Lithuania and Portugal, but also I think today, in an age of absolute mobility, everybody's traveling all over the place. It's not everybody, you know. It's really still a minority of privileged people, but that control enough the public opinion so that we have this feeling that everybody goes everywhere. But nobody goes to Portugal. I don't want to say that about Lithuania because I'm not sure, but to Portugal, nobody goes there just to cross the country to go somewhere else.
That's right.
If you're in Portugal, you chose to go there.
Yes.
You're not just crossing, you know, because it's so central that you can get anywhere and have to cross Portugal. No, you have to choose to go there. So in that sense, there's I think there's a sort of human scale and maybe I'm romanticizing, but there's a sort of, feeling of being on the side so quieter that has always been like in this Portuguese idea of who we are. I don't know if it corresponds to the reality, but there's this idea that it's, you know, there's some sort of sweetness, also some sort of sadness, a complex of being inferior, surely towards our neighboring Spanish that we feel are louder and prouder than we are. So in that sense, it's I think it's a country of but it's also a country of contradictions. So next to this nostalgia, you have other type of I think it's also a heritage. How to say? I mean, when people talk about saudade, when they talk about the sweetness of Portuguese people, the nostalgia, the melancholy, the looking at the sea and you know, thinking of poetry and this sort of, I sort of half recognize myself and half recognize the heritage of dictatorship, of more than 40 years of dictatorship that said we're proudly alone, we're discreet and respectful. And we obey the law, and we're quiet, and we're a silent, honest people, which was, I mean, totally not corresponding to reality, because the fascist dictatorship was a time of a lot of corruption in Portugal. But of course, the facade was this sort of isolated from the rest of Europe. This sort of Atlantic people, a bit messianic, a bit like. Now we're sad, but once we were great, we will be great once again. You see that a bit in Pessoa, but of course Pessoa is several ideas of Portugal in several personalities, because he has this heteronymous, what we call heteronyms. It's not even a pseudonym, it's much deeper than that, because he invented personalities. So you have Alberto Caeiro, the pagan, the guy that says who needs a library when you have nature, for instance. But then you have Álvaro de Campos, the engineer that grew up in I think either United Kingdom or South Africa, but very influenced by English culture. So he's all about science and progress, and cities is urban, while Alberto Caeiro is rural. And then you still have Ricardo Reis, the classicist that writes inspired by the Greeks and the classics, etc. So you have all these people, and then you have Fernando Pessoa signing his own poems, and he's probably the most Portuguese of all, the most attached to Portuguese identity. So it's really it's such a reason, and many others. I mean, smaller names and personalities, but the Book of Disquiet of Bernardo Soares, it's also a big statement of Pessoa. It's really a world of diversity, Pessoa, in that sense that he can surprise us in what we think about him. But and I mean, I think still today Portugal, now that we've been 51 years now since the revolution and the start of democracy, I think still today in Portuguese society you see residues of the dictatorship, and you see how the threat of far-right authoritarian populism today in Portugal, that is very, very strong. In very little time, it grew very quickly, is based, yes, on the way we see all over Europe and the world this sort of authoritarian far-rights take the power, but it's also still based a lot in the memory or the nostalgia of those very orderly times of dictatorship, would people would follow the rules and follow the boss.
You know, the great difference, I think, and yesterday, several of us from the initiative group, we were at your performance, and when we were listening to the text, because so much of this movement that we have started now is based on imposing our language on the political field. And then the political field doesn't know what to do with that because they don't know this language. And language becomes the most important tool in it. And it opens doors that actually political actions or legal actions cannot. And everyone keeps on asking, like, what are you going to do politically? And I say, you are asking us a wrong question. Like, you should listen to what we say. That's the only thing that matters now, and that will open the door for politics. So yesterday, when we were listening to the text, we basically came to an agreement after the performance that if we would have listened to the same thing 2 months ago, that wouldn't have ring the bell so much as yesterday, when even certain words just, I don't know if you have seen the reactions of the people and where those different from other performances in other European countries, but some of those were about the actual things that happened yesterday, before yesterday, about the actual wording in the post, which I wrote, Gintarė wrote, or some other people from the initiative group wrote. And although when the way you define fascism, I understand and I see that it's very much based on the actual historical experience of Portugal.
No.
And because we came to the same word, like the first week after the protest, I said we needed to say it in a clear, that is the crawling fascism. But then I used the definition of Umberto Eco and the definitions, if we want to go for more political things, the definition of Timothy Snyder, where institutions are being attacked. In your case, the definition of fascism is more of an ideological thing, you know. And yesterday, the interesting thing that I think happened in everyone's head was that in some case we were like, yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. And then at certain point it's like, no, for us it's not that, you know. For example, a word security, which then this great performance at the end of the performance, this monologue of the fascist, keeps on repeating this word. And I was watching and thinking, but we say this word and we pretend that we are anti-fascist word. But Lithuania, having always been a colony, not a colonial power, but a colony, is actually struggling with a constant threat to the actual existence of the state, you know. Now with the Ukrainian crisis, Portugal and vice versa was or is still, what do you think, like a colonial power, like
well, still dealing with that.
Still dealing with that.
Very, very.
What do you think that brings to the mentality? Because it's such a strange thing, a small country ruling such a vast area. So we are usually big colonial powers like France, Great Britain. I'm asking that because I made this film about Kazys Pakštas, a Lithuanian geographer from 1930s, who basically, when he saw that Nazism and totalitarian communism was rising, he said, we are among these two, we're gonna be crushed by it, we need to find a new place for us. And so he started traveling around the world, looking for the so-called alternative Lithuania, and pretty soon he came with a conclusion that there is no free space left. He was a Christian Democrat, so he wasn't very fond of big colonial powers and colonialism as a phenomenon itself, although was flirting with it at the same time. And then in some of his writings, there were these statements that maybe Portuguese, being the small country ruling big colonies, and not being, that was his words, that brutal as, for example, French are for their colonial. He said maybe they could give us a little bit of. But then, of course, that got totally discredited after the Second World War.
Well, for the there's plenty of fascinating subjects. One, the specificity of fascism and universalism of the concept. I think first thing, why is the word fascist in the title of the piece, for instance, yes, which was a strong decision way before the piece was written. Why we wanted to address the issue of how can you still call fascist to someone? That's one of the debates in the piece. Can you call or not this person a fascist? It's a question that it's there. Can you use the word in this way or not? Is it appropriate, etc. So I must start by saying that the way that fascist is used in the piece is used by a group of characters. It's not necessarily the way I would use it. If I would, organize an assembly or a political movement or talk to journalists about the reality of politics in Portugal or Europe or the world. But these characters use it in a very ideological way. For me, it was important also that the word fascist in this story had to do with Portuguese history of fascism, so that there was no disconnect, total disconnect, as the new fascists would wish, with actual fascism, historical fascism. Although it's very different, of course, and one of the things that makes it very different, it's the importance of the state, it's the respect of some institutions that are taken instead of destroyed, it's the denial of several concepts that the fascists would adopt, etc. So it's not the same movement, it's not the same thing, but you see that there's an inspiration and that the word has to be recuperated. And for me, the word has to be recuperated in a poetic sense, in a poetic activism sense, because it's not normalized. So not even a fascist likes to be called a fascist in public. While, radical white, far right, even white supremacists, or there's very few words like racist, fascist, that are not yet normalized, and that are almost flirting with the illegal or criminal, according to some constitutions. So in that sense, it's still a tool, the word fascist. And that's why I think that often, sooner or later, movements that oppose to authoritarian parties or rises to power end up recuperating this word, because the word is still useful, because it provokes a reaction and obliges people, public opinion, to a position. Do you agree that I use this word or not? And if you do agree, why are you not taking a stand? So that it denormalizes. It makes a fascist is exceptional in democracy and should not be tolerated. So the moment you accept the word fascist, you have to deal with not accepting the normalization. So that's why I wanted to use it, because I wanted the debate that goes with it, not the acceptance of he's a fascist, because I do not believe also that in all these movements you can apply these words to all their members. Exactly. But the problem is that everybody's buying on an ideological set and a strategy of taking the power and practicing political power that actually enters the concept of fascism. So somehow, for me, for instance, Snyder and the whole concept of the space, the institutional space, and the destruction of institutions, for me, it's pretty much the heart of the thing today. And that's why I think, for instance, cultural organizations like what you're doing in Lithuania, it's extremely important, because it's also an institutional movement. When you see the amount of organizations that took a stand, this means that an institution chose not to be neutral in something. This institution has an obligation not to be neutral. It's interesting. I escape because it's interesting that I think when cultural organizations and For instance, with Festival d'Avignon, where I work, we had that last year in 2024 when the far right was about to take the power in France. And we spoke out saying like the festival appeals anyone to not vote in the far right. And the criticism was like, you can't interfere with elections.
Yeah.
You can't take this stand. It's partisan or it's too political. You don't have the right. It's not legitimate for a cultural organization and a festival, mainly a historical festival that has been supported by the state and by the money of the taxpayers. You have no right to take this stand. And my answer was not only we have the right, we have the obligation to do it. First, the historical obligation. Festival d'Avignon was created in 1947 with the help of resistance against the Nazi occupation after the end of the war. It's a festival that wanted social cohesion to defend a set of ideas, not for neutrality, not to say like culture is there, now we all hang out at a festival and we do a festival so that everybody forgets what happened. No, we all are together. We even have a sort of artistic party. In 47, crazy, huh? In 47, they say what to do to, better society. Let's do an artistic party in summer. So they do this. Jean Villard starts this with the support of the government. And while doing this, the idea is social cohesion because there's a set of values that we should all gather around, which are, the set of values of a democratic constitution. So there's no neutrality in cultural organizations for a number of things. They're even forced not to be neutral. Like a hospital cannot be neutral in the issue of racism. An hospital, a public hospital, is obliged to be anti-racist. There's no neutrality there. So we of course, there's reserve. You can't probably support this party or that party, but in some things like defending democracy, all public organizations should take a stand. So what I found very inspiring and very difficult to find in Europe, in other countries, is that your reaction to the threats to artistic freedom, but also the threats overall to democracy in Lithuania, was not just a movement of artists with some organizations more or less spread. It's a very impressive number of cultural organizations that agreed to take a stand. This institutional block, I think, is what's essential because institutions are the citadel. It's where we all should gather to defend democracy. When half of the castle is taken, you still have the citadel. These are, for instance, the national theaters, like where we are, the hospitals, the schools, all the public institutions, they should be the citadel.
I want you to give then a couple of arguments that we are getting the last 2 weeks and to hear what you think about it. Like, first of them, which is pretty common among the political scientists here in Lithuania, is that we are forcing the polarization of a society likewise. What do you think about it?
I think...
which is already polarized enough, and they keep on using this word that basically the polarization, which I don't understand actually as a term, because I think there must be an actor in a movement. It cannot be just without the one who acts, who does the polarization. But they say the polarization is that big that if you're gonna swing the boat even more, we won't get out of the situation anyway without overcapping the
I mean, I think there are tactics, and then there are values. I prefer to discuss values even if we can discuss tactics. I think it's a very cynical thing to say, if you call yourself a Democrat, that someone defending democracy is polarizing society. Because the starting point is already totally adulterated, totally transformed.
Yeah.
The starting point is that Democrats that try to fight fascism or authoritarian movements or populist far right, radical right movements, they are addressing rhetorics and sometimes also political practice, if they have the power, that polarized already. That's the basis of those rhetorics is dividing. It's continued to say to, middle class people that poor, and especially poor foreigners, are the reason why they are not better off, while actually no, it's just you have to, pay more taxes if you're extra wealthy.
Yeah.
In most countries, this logic is you can't fight it. In most countries, extra wealthy people don't pay enough taxes, but middle class people that sort of can dominate public opinion by the speech that poor foreigners are the ones who are the reason for their economic problem.
Yeah.
So just this logic is very simplistic, the way I'm putting it, I understand, but it's as simple as that, So in the speech of the far right, because now we're dealing with a far right that is absolutely accomplice with huge capital and billionaires. It was not always like this. It was not always like this with the fascists all the time, but right now it is. So we're dealing with an ultra-liberal, capitalistic far right that's even nicer to billionaires than the usual liberals. From center right or center left in power. So you have this polarizing that's at the center of their rhetorics. They already divided society. They already create a divide to speak in the name of the majority. They already single out minorities and try to single out enemies in order to gather people around their speech. So when you react to that, what you're doing is singling them out for this polarizing attitude and for this destruction of social cohesion. So when you defend things that are in the Constitution and you defend the idea of a democratic ideal, you're not polarizing. You're proposing, sometimes in a more radical way, sometimes in a more aggressive way, but you're proposing unity in society. But I think it's part of the strategy of the far right to accuse people who defend what should be consensus in a democratic society, accuse them of polarizing. That's why institutions are very important, because institutions legitimate these positions. If a big festival, a big theater, a big hospital take a stand, this is an institutional stand, and it has to be based on the rule of law.
Then there is another argument, which is probably a consequence of what you're saying. Okay, but then your actions shouldn't be against things, but you should take up responsibility to go into the people if political class was unable to do that. And we must admit that a lot of these cultural institutions, even probably the one we are now sitting at, wasn't actually specifically targeting the most marginalized groups. And now I'm talking about, in the Lithuanian case, it's more about regions, about the most deserted places where usually the income level coincides with voting for the most radical movements. Yeah. In your performance, there's also this thing, I remember it from yesterday, there's this house and the character is saying, I don't remember the exact words, but the idea is, maybe you should stop talking there in Lisbon and come here, right? And do something with this family, with this forest, with this land, with this soil. And I know that's, yesterday I've been talking with some friends after the performance, and they were like, okay, what shall we do then? What shall we do? They are not listening for us. And I said, well, maybe we shall just massively go into there where people, now they are shouting and they will probably throw tomatoes at us. But maybe that's what we actually need to do now. Stand there, wipe out the tomatoes, have another blow of tomatoes until people steam off and say, okay. And only then you can say stuff to her. Because when we are protesting here and there are people coming towards us, I mean, a lot of support, but at the same time, you get people who come and they are shouting stuff into your face. And I don't think there might be a dialogue at this point here, because it's either I'm louder or them are louder, but what they need, it seems to me in this case, the temperature is so high that first of all, they need to calm down. And to calm down is to somehow de-steam, you know. What do you think about the responsibility of a cultural scene at this?
Listen, Karolis, I see where this is going. And I have to keep on going like this, which I love. Well, let's have a conversation. I have to do sort of an intro.
Yeah.
I'm not a specialist in the sense of
No, but
I cannot advise. I tell you why. When I created this show that you just saw, Catarina and the Beauty of Killing Fascists, in Portugal in 2020, there was one far-right deputy at the National Assembly, in a National Assembly of 215 representatives. Today, in 2025, with this piece that became very important in Portugal, outside the context just of culture and theater, because it became, there was more political articles written about this piece than critics or reviews or cultural articles. So there was a huge debate and controversy around it. But 5 years later, there are more than 80 far-right representatives in the National Assembly, and they became the second party in Portugal when they were, in 2020, the sixth or seventh. So this proves probably that, not that theater is powerless, but that this play is powerless. So this means that I'm not the best person to ask for advice in fighting the far right, actually, because in Portugal, while doing this piece, I was probably not very efficient. On the other hand, I could also argue, speculate, that if it was not for this piece, they would already be in government. But that would be a far stretch and very arrogant. So I'm not going to do that. Very pretentious. But this to say that I'm not a specialist, but I believe that there are three areas where it's very important to intervene today. In a positive way. I mean, to defend democracy, and to defend democracy and improve democracy. And improving democracy today means fighting the far right and authoritarian movements. For me, that's clear. But that's not a purpose in itself. That's necessary to improve democracy and also to protect democracy. So I think the protest, the actual answering back, not letting those sort of rhetorics occupy all the political space, having a debate against, confronting, calling out the lies, proposing an alternative of how to read the world. That's very important. That's a mission of the parties, but it can also be a mission of grassroots movements. And I think one of the things that grassroots movements were always accused of, since the civil rights movements or anti-colonial movement or whatever, is that, oh, well, you should really do something. Why don't you form a party and become a candidate? Activists don't need to be candidates. Citizens don't need to be party members to have an opinion or vote or participate even beyond vote. As a party, if it's politicians that are in parties that say that, they should immediately shut up, because that's disrespecting the civic dimension of any individual without being in a party. I was never in a party. I consider myself more citizen than many party members in my country. So in that sense, I think you have to call out that lie. That you have a political opinion and you organized an assembly. You should form a party. Otherwise, it's not real.
Exactly.
Exactly. No, it's absolutely real, and that's why you're bothered. Is that I can do it without a party, because that forces you to take a position about me and reality. So that's one thing. The second thing is, of course, media. Media is totally, I don't know the situation in Lithuania. Of course, I know the overall European situation in the way that media are interfered by, foreign powers, by, concentration, by billionaires that are close to the far right. I see it in France, I see it in Portugal, how media became really a propaganda tool, how disinformation, be it in the traditional media, be it in the social networks, is today really a huge poison in our society. So in that sense, that's a very hard struggle, but occupying the public opinion having a presence in public opinion, it's very important. And then the third thing, and I think it's more a competence of institutions than individuals, but of course institutions only change because individuals make that change happen, is actually occupying the spaces that, you know, the democratic systems abandoned. And this happens in every country at different levels. We should not, you know, also not become, you know, ultra self-guilty and flagellating ourselves because, you know, the National Theatre did not perform in every village of the country. But we should be able to do a serious self-criticism and understand that institutions failed people. These people might be angry, and that anger might become anti-democratic in the votes, in the supportive movements, in the ideas, in the, you know, day-to-day life. And it's an obligation of the institutions, if they really want to protect democracy and their public service mission, to go towards those people, to not abandon those people. So institutions, I mean, individual, you can do what you want. If you want to hate someone who votes in a racist party, it's your right to do so, as long as you don't commit a crime. Institutions don't have that right. Institutions have to work for that person also, for that electorate, not for the party, but they have to be in contact with the people that, you know, with regions, for instance, or territories that often were abandoned, where you don't have, you know, universities, when you don't have movie theaters, when you don't have theaters, and they have to occupy this space. I give you an example. In Avignon, we're surrounded by far-right villages. Avignon is not far-right, but around Avignon. We work with every village, not with the mayor, if he's far-right. But then we work with a school, we work with a prison, we work with an association, but we don't abandon a territory because in this territory most people vote far right. This you should not do. You have to occupy the space, you have to identify where is the void. Where are the people that can say the National Theatre never looked at me or took me seriously, or I was never had any benefit from the work of this National Theatre. And the National Theatre has to figure out how to spread their mission and touch more people, but also how to tell the story in the public opinion of what they do already. Because when it comes to cultural organizations, one of the accusations is elitism and disconnect with the people. And that's not always the case. That's a perception thing that's created by the far right, but that it excludes all the companies that work outside big cities, that excludes all theaters, all efforts. And in many countries, I don't know about Lithuania because I don't know the reality that well, but in many countries, for instance, if I think of France, I'm in awe, amazed by the quantity of culture in proximity with, you know, population that is not in big cities. There is a lot going on. But it's easy to say, you know, in a TV show or in a social network, oh, this bourgeois culture artists, they know nothing about reality. They're disconnected from reality. What they say, they're living from public subventions all this time. They're privileged. Why should we hear them? And that's not the reality. You know, in many countries, culture is an economical activity much stronger than many industries. In many countries, it's a public service widespread in the whole country that touches many people. So in that sense, public opinion and media are also important, not only to do the new work, but to tell the story of the work that has been done in a truthful way.
I ask this, you know, like you say, I cannot give you an advice. I don't ask for advice because I'm now in the role of an activist, and I understand that when we are reaching out to people, to the politologists, to the artists, they just say this perspective. It's upon us to draw the action.
What do you feel it's the
action plot?
It's like the next step, because I should tell you that when I look from a distance and I started to realize what was going on in the last week or 2 weeks, it's very impressive for me the amount of engagement in such a country as Lithuania, of the amount of institutions and people engaged. And it's easy. I mean, I'm not only walking in cultural spaces when I'm in
Right,
Vilnius. I'm
right.
just strolling, and I see the impact of this movement. I see it present. The iconography, people are talking about it. What do you feel is the next step?
I guess we need to build on that, you know, like we somehow touched something deep down there that people had. And I cannot use other words as, you know, these words that were somehow marginalized in the sense that only a naive person who does not know how to successfully navigate in this life might use words as truth, as love, as freedom, as democracy. All of them became senseless, void of any essence, you know. And now when we, for 2 weeks, have been repeating this word, but trying to ground them with our actions, sleeping 2 hours per day, you know, actually writing, I don't know, 20 quality posts on Facebook. Now suddenly Facebook is not a shithole in Lithuania. Actually, it's the big source of like intellectual ideas, and everyone now wants to read it because it's better than any magazine, any journal, you know, anything that has been going on in this country for years. And now, in the context of that, the political rhetorics seem so poor of whatever that they just cannot hide it. And as I said, they don't know the language, they don't know the dictionary, they don't know nothing about what they are talking, you know. And
Are you connecting? Are you having a feedback from other areas of civil society?
of course.
How is that going?
We will.
How are you heard? Not by the far right or even the political parties.
Yeah.
But what about the real society that they should be serving, like other sectors of society?
Well, look, I think what they managed to do for quite some time, and I'm talking about the political elite in general, is that they somehow grabbed the people and brought them into this, into their linguaggio. And it's all about, oh, you want more social security. Let's talk about the social conditions we can develop there with the trade unions. And it's all, suddenly it becomes very obscure and people don't understand. They start a protest movement. I'm talking here, for example, about the farmers, right? I had no idea what the farmers have problems with before I started this, like our field. Neither any one of us in the initiative group had any idea of what actually the farmers' problems were. And then somehow we're just repeating words that were important for us, but then suddenly we see the support for the strike of October 5th from the protest group of the farmers, which they call themselves the Green Cross. And they have been building these green crosses in Lithuanian fields for, I think, since 2019. And then some farmer reaches me and I say, okay, just write me one pager. What's your problem? Like, we have so little time these days because we need to organize things and push them further. And then he writes me and I say, can we conclude that your problem is lack of freedom here? Like lack of subjectivity, that somehow this political system pressed you into submitting yourself to some rules and regulations that doesn't allow you to freely understand and do something with your soil and your hands and, And he says, probably yes, and probably that's why I actually got to you, because someone said a clear word. What's the problem? We are finally out of this linguaggio of, social, this European Union terms that nobody understands, but everyone keeps on spitting. And because of that, then we can easily connect to the teachers, to the people in the medical field, to the sportsmen. And also such word as courage, just simple courage to stand up and say things. This Monday, suddenly I see the broadcast from the parliament. I see young sportsmen, like really Lithuanian record holders, who are standing up for themselves in the parliament. I haven't seen that never in this country. And I know that this courage to stand up in the tribune and say, like, no, we won't subscribe under this, comes out of what they saw in this movement and ourselves. And yes, at the beginning, the words are pretty rough. At the beginning, the requirement that we stated is an anti-something requirement, which we get as a critique from the politologist. You should somehow, formulate it in a more consolidating way, instead of just, keeping yourself with this party in the cultural ministry. But I see that there are these things that are deep down there, uniting every single human being all over the world, that somehow we're born anew, and that's like, it's not, if we would limit ourselves with like better conditions for the cultural feed, nobody would care. Come on.
No.
But
if we do a bit of political science fiction,
yeah,
let's say that your main demand, which is no far right party at the Ministry of Culture, that you get it. That's also like, it's such a stand that suddenly, don't you feel you have a responsibility to continue?
Of course we do. Of course we do. With this, I mean, that's the main thing.
So let's say that whatever adversary you might have, they should, if they're clever, they should understand that if you lose, you'll continue. If you win, you will continue.
I think they do understand. I think there is a conclusion in at least the initiative group that like we are very well aware that this grew bigger than from what it started with. Like it started with something that we defined as there was this Lithuanian president, Stasys Lozoraitis, who never became one. He was a candidate, and he was the so-called the president of Hope in 1993, a long-term emigre whose father left Lithuania when Soviets occupied it. And he worked as an ambassador in the West without the actual recognition. So he himself personally somehow continued the statehood of a country that doesn't exist. Never accepted fully into the hall where the ambassadors would gather. He would sit somewhere on the bench beside, but it would still be present there. So throughout tens of years until 1990. And then he came back. And there were these elections where people voted either for him or for the leader of the Communist Party, like the one who suddenly said, "Oh, now we are anti-Moscow and like we're gonna lead this country further." And he lost. And very soon he died of cancer. Before his death, he left a testament, like a political legacy, which was one single sentence: defend your borders. And everyone for quite some time thought that he just meant the actual defense of the state borders. But then at this very point where we got this new Minister of Culture and this party appointed, we understood that those borders are this field at the beginning, but they coincide with the borders because with the borders of the state, because us, unlike probably Portugal, we have a very clear threat, the physical threat of a physical enemy, of what I call the center of fascist international. Now Moscow became one. It used to be the center of communist international, but by now it's the center of a fascist international. And they are threatening, like they are killing Ukrainians with this fervor of brutality and just mere death, nothing else in it. Ideologically, it's void as well. So we have this, and for years, for like last year, since the Ukrainian war started, we were just waiting with a weapon looking to the horizon, like when they're gonna call, when they're gonna come, where we need to shoot, what drone do we need to shoot down in order to defend ourselves.
No.
So the borders were very clear. And at this point, when suddenly we, at that September 22nd evening, we understood that, shit, they pushed the Trojan horse. Meanwhile, we're watching there. And inside the country, as in your performance, there is no point of guns.
No.
Otherwise, there was just gonna be a lot of friendly fire, and we will end up as your characters and before the fascist is starting the new speech. So So we understood that basically here the only weapon we have is actually language and voice, and we need to start saying things aloud, which we haven't been saying for quite some time, expecting that political elite somehow is going to sort this thing out. So we thought that president is going to be the gatekeeper, maybe the main party is going to be the gatekeeper. We don't use this term, the far right, here for this movement. I think it's a movement. It's a structure which is just a creation of black political technologies. I cannot prove they are controlled from Moscow, but I think that the pattern is pretty clear because it has been replicated in different Eastern European countries, Georgia, Slovakia, Hungary, the way they function. And the Slovak case, for example, gave a lot of instructions for us, although Slovaks didn't know it, actually. But when we went to the prime minister the first day, and she proposed us that maybe then we can bring us some candidate ourselves, and I said, no way, because likewise you are trying to shovel this party under the carpet so that we will gulp it down, and then for some time we will have this candidate, and then you will revoke it because he won't be able to function because the party is actually controlling the ministry, and likewise we'll lose the momentum of the protest. So we said, no, the whole thing is rotten. They call themselves a party. We don't think it's a party. You cannot call yourself a party if the whole of your elective campaign is basically lie over lie over lie over lie, hate over hate over hate over hate. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, antithesis, it's just, if you listen to the leader, you cannot make two sentences out of what he's saying. It's like anti-everything, pro-everything. It's just this dialogue, this monologue that is in your performance, this never-ending stream of words that then might be replicated more and more and more. And if we're gonna sit in the hall without clapping, he will talk for hours. That's what people are. That's why it resonated so much yesterday, And that's why everyone saw him in this character in the hall when he appeared with this costume, And then we said that we even deliberately are not wearing any fancy clothes because by now it becomes the costume the politician wears becomes this kind of 19th century outfit with a funny hat and there was even a shift in the way politicians dressed somewhere when the modernity started. So I think it's about to happen as well. I think the costumes are gonna fall. Because somehow they become and so from this point, I think we need to carry on where we started. So the language, the solidarity of the people, the politicality without becoming a political in the way the normal system understands it, because yes, we keep on getting this question so are you gonna be a political power? What do you mean? Political power in terms of having seats at the parliament? No. Nobody wants that. But political power to influence the track of Lithuanian politics, of course, yes. By now we understood we might have a voice in it and might have an impact in it, and I want to keep it down, and everyone in the initiative group want to keep it going, I think. And when you say, even you as an outsider might have a feeling that we have more support than only cultural institutions. And there is a desire for it to keep on going also from a wider population, I think.
Yeah, and I think for sure also, you gave examples of, Georgia or Slovakia or and other countries. I think in a different way, I see it happen in many countries, for surely all over Europe.
Yeah.
And I think this also international dialogue and support when it comes to cultural organizations, it's very important. I see, for instance, every summer when we organize the festival, I see more and more engagement and organizations willing to debate the threat of authoritarian movements specifically to culture. So I think it goes both ways. Of course, it goes towards civil society and other sectors of society to broaden the spectrum of a debate that comes from culture, and the fact that it comes from culture makes it that words and vocabulary are even more important. But the contribution, I think, to politics from the cultural sector can also be to question the way we speak about politics and about society. And on the other hand, I think international connection, I see it more and more. The need for international cooperation towards the defense of freedom of creation. I think if at one time European projects, for instance, supported by the European Union of international cooperation between cultural organizations from different countries were almost a vital tool for production to build up artistic projects and make them travel. I think today one of the main aims of European projects formally supported by European Union or not, but of international cooperation in Europe, is to develop strategies to defend freedom of creation and freedom of programming and autonomy, artistic and political autonomy of cultural organizations. So I see more and more organizations engaged into that. And I think also it's one of the struggles for cultural organizations all over Europe for the next years, if not decades, is how to defend, not because defending more money for culture, of course that's part of it also, because money translates political importance, but defending autonomy and freedom in cultural institutions. We see how also this debate is a cultural war, and taking over institutions is, for authoritarian movements, very easy, very fast. There's no reserve, there's no second thoughts. What you see happening with Donald Trump, with the Kennedy Center in Washington, is something we will see happen clearly in national theaters, in big cultural organizations all over Europe, the moment our authoritarian movements take the power. We see it in Italy, we see it in other countries, we saw it in Hungary, we keep on seeing it. And I think defending freedom of creation will be one of the great aims of why cultural organizations from different countries should be in dialogue and cooperation.
Tiago, let's wrap this up. We've spat a lot of words here, and it's easy for us, for a person who knows how to put word to words. We can continue this for hours, But let's shrink it down to a single word, which you think must be repeated. If we remain with only one word, which needs to be repeated amidst silence in Europe now, what do you think is the word? What would you say?
Democracy.
Democracy.
Yeah. It's still open to interpretation.
And freedom is then a part of it. You wouldn't put freedom above.
I'll tell you why democracy. Freedom has been, and I love that you say freedom, because it was my second word. If I would doubt between two, but freedom has been taken. If you see the speech in the piece,
Yes.
first thing the guy says after 2 hours, the
Freedom.
kidnapped fascist, is, I want to tell you about freedom.
Yes.
And that comes from Bolsonaro. It's those first sentences are not exactly, but taken, inspired from the speech of victory of the presidential campaign of Bolsonaro.
Brazil.
He starts by saying, I want to tell you about freedom. And it was taken. Freedom of speech, for instance, today, it's an alibi for a lot of hate speech from authoritarian movements and leaders. The word freedom, of course, the way I understand it, like civil freedom and and freedom of speech and opinion against the control of a state or an authority, of course. But let's say that in the current state of the world, they took too much power over the word freedom for me to be able to accept that freedom would be, as one word, enough to control the debate. Of course, I like your game because I like word games. Of course, one word is too. One word is not enough. But if I had to, do a T-shirt, I would go for democracy, because then we have to debate what it is. And the moment we have to debate what it is, we have to debate it freely, and we have to have a space of plural opinion, which means not controlled, not conditioned. We need dialogue, so we need to be able to listen. We cannot accept a polarization that refuses the humanity of the other and his or her opinion about what democracy is. So I would start with democracy. Because then when we would talk about freedom afterwards, it's the kind of freedom that you can discuss in democracy.
In democracy. Okay. We need tools, That's a useful tool for us to go into the why.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we can continue for hours, because I think we found a lot that we agree upon. In a few hours, we would start finding what we don't agree upon, and that's when I would say, okay, the word democracy starts counting now, because we would be able to find the richness in our disagreement. I think that's the amazing thing, and that's why I think, for instance, cultural organizations play a huge role today in this struggle. Not only because they are able to organize and speak about politics, not engage with the vocabulary that it's tired and have other ways of looking at it, but because within their mission of a national theater, of a festival, of a public movie theater, a cinema festival, whatever, cultural organizations have to defend diversity of aesthetics.
Yeah.
This means diversity of ways of looking at the world. This means that this diversity produces disagreement, and that disagreement is positive and rich. That's the basis of democracy, is that when we understand where we don't agree, we can say that what we agree upon is enough for us to disagree and find then other ideas through compromise, through voting, through whatever, that are better than your single idea or my single idea. What authoritarian movements bet upon is that this is impossible. We can't dialogue anymore. So there is a void, and this void is occupied by people who don't want to dialogue. They just want to impose a vision, they want to be followed, and they promise that they will save the country, clean the country. These are terms that you hear from these movements. The golden age will be back, great again, bright future. It's totally this sort of advertising lies, messianic, savior-like things that you just have to think 2 minutes to understand it's a lie. But you buy on the lie, because the lie is promising you something that the other vocabulary is not promising anymore. Because yes, we bought on such a polarized political debate that disagreement is not fruitful anymore. While in culture, in a programmation of a theater, of a festival, in a cultural event, disagreement, the difference, it's fruitful. There's no doubt about it. Nobody says that, oh, this piece was different from that piece, or this concert was very different from that concert. Oh, that's a problem. No, that's amazing. I don't want to see the same concert twice. So this difference, different ways of looking at the world, of engaging with the world, is really fruitful. While in politics, we don't see that anymore. We complain. They never agree on anything. They're just blah, 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 blah. But because the debate doesn't produce a new idea that proves that this disagreement is fruitful. So, I think cultural organizations, cultural life, cultural events, the public service of culture is the living proof that disagreeing democracy is fruitful. And that's very scary. being a living proof of democracy, very scary for an authoritarian movement. And that's why cultural life and cultural organizations are a clear target, very clear targets. They're an adversary identified by the authoritarian movements. So either you react, you build, you keep on fighting, either you will be just a target, but you won't, you're silent as a cultural organization won't buy your survival. You will only facilitate, like some politicians did, with the fascists or with the authoritarian from the 20th century. If you try to go with, nice ways and try to find a way, maybe we could find an agreement, etc., you will just be railroaded. That's clear. If you're a cultural organization, you're a living proof of democracy, so you're a target. You will be destroyed or taken or occupied or, transformed somehow. But you won't keep on, because you were silent and nice, maybe 1 or 2 years, even a nicer budget, even a little of, I give you some more money so that you're quiet.
Yeah.
That won't last long. You will disappear. Your mission will disappear. You will become like a golden palace for some sort of, dictator or look-alike.
I agree. I enjoyed.
Okay, let's keep on talking off the camera so that we find what we disagree and things get richer. Perfect. Hey, thank you.
Thanks.